Listen close. The flood washed the world, but it didn't bleach the stain. The true horror begins after the rain, when the ground still smelled like wet cedar and judgment, and traces back to a single devastating glance before any waters rose. Angels looked down, women looked up, and the border between the realms, a border older than mountains, began to thin like fog under the sun. You know the verse. The sons of God saw the daughters of men. You can almost hear the hinge of history groan on that word, saw. It wasn't lust at first. It was wonder. Beings built to carry light noticed human beauty, imperfect, earthy, alive. They'd heard songs in the high courts of heaven, but never a lullaby at a fire. They'd watched galaxies whirl like jeweled wheels, but never seen a wife stretch dough at dawn and laugh at a joke that wasn't funny. And something in them shifted. At first, it was a whisper. They hovered at the ledge of their assignment and stared. The women felt it too, like the quiet before a thunderhead rolls across Kansas farmland. A prickle on the neck, a stillness in the air that says, brace. They baked bread, braided hair, hauled water in clay jars, and the very ordinariness of it sent tremors through watchers who'd never once felt a heartbeat speed up for anything but worship. Desire, foreign, electric, rippled like heat over a desert road. The oath came next, not an accident, a pact. A we jump together so none turns back sort of deal. The watchers traded their posts for a fantasy they couldn't name without lying to themselves. To feel as humans feel, to know touch, the ache of missing, the relief of being known. Not exactly the office romance HR approves, right? But rebellion always dresses itself in the language of experience, of more. And when their feet finally touched soil, beauty weaponized itself. Villages fell silent the way a football stadium does at a last-second field goal. Collective breath held. These weren't handsome strangers passing through with a smile and a story. These were beings in bodies that moved like they remembered how wings used to feel. Voices that didn't just talk but resonated, like singing bowls ringing in the chest. Light that didn't bounce off them so much as emanate. Women changed. Not overnight, but enough that their sisters noticed. A glow behind the eyes, a distraction in the middle of churning butter, an ache they couldn't name. Was it love? No. It was complicity that felt like destiny.
The watchers chose, and the women answered, and what followed wore a tuxedo that said marriage, but carried the breath of a crypt. Unholy weddings, unblessed beds. The line wasn't just crossed, it was erased. And when creation's fabric tears, it doesn't rip quiet, it screams. They conceived, and the world learned what it means to birth something you can't carry. Children too big for cradles, too strong for swaddling, half memory of heaven, half mud of earth, all appetite. Call them Nephilim, call them giants, call them the reason good men hid their sons and left fields unharvested. Their footfalls made the ground shudder like a freight train rolling by your farmhouse at midnight. Their moods were weather, sudden, total, dangerous. This is where the story most channels end. Big monsters, bigger flood, the end. But that's the preface. The real wound is quieter. The women who said yes to glittering rebellion, and then, after the storm, had to live in the quiet. The ark floated, the cries went still, and the water finally lay mirror flat. Somewhere out there, the wives of the fallen stood on a stripped, clean world and saw themselves for the first time. It wasn't romance they tasted anymore. It was ash. Here's the part most won't touch. Heaven's general, Michael, does not carry a sword as a prop. Justice is not a metaphor. When chains closed over the wrists of the angels who traded glory for glamour, judgment didn't stop with the husbands. The aftermath had names and faces. Women who had carried the forbidden, who had midwifed the nightmare. Some collapsed in grief that shook their chests harder than any labor. Some dug their nails into the dirt and begged for mercy till their voices broke. And some, like the infamous Naama, lifted their chin and chose pride over repentance, elegance like a blade. What happens to a soul that marries rebellion and will not divorce it? Legends whisper one answer in salt and foam. Sirens, beautiful voices that lead you toward rocks you didn't see until your boat splinters on them. The curse fits the crime like a key fits a lock. Beauty that harms, songs that drown, eternal allure with no tender end. No one writes that in wedding vows, but judgment does not care how pretty your handwriting is. I don't tell you this to spook you with folklore. I tell you because boundaries are not suggestions, they're architecture. They hold the roof up. And when creatures forged for worship tried to become creatures made for longing, the roof caved in on everyone standing below. Maybe you felt that in miniature. Someone promising you the sky and delivering an undertow. A DM that felt like destiny and turned out to be a drain. The lights are softer now. The captions are cuter, but the math is the same. So we open the door to this series right here. Angels who saw, women who answered, giants who devoured, a flood that mourned as much as it erased, and a commander of heaven sent to write the final line across a page already soaked in ink. Breathe. We're going deeper. You can leave now, but I think you're here because your spirit recognizes an old pattern in a new outfit. If this stirred anything in you, curiosity, conviction, a need to name your own forbidden more, don't push it down. Lean in. Share this with someone who thinks ancient stories don't speak modern truth. Drop your thoughts below. Tell me the boundary that saved you once. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The veil lifts further from here, and the water's voice isn't done speaking.
Imagine the most arresting face you've ever seen. Now multiply that by the night sky. Polished, star-shot, impossible not to stare at. That's what walked into marketplaces and along vineyard rows once the watchers traded rank for romance. Flowers leaned toward them. Birds went quiet. People forgot words mid-sentence. Beauty, real beauty, always humbles. This didn't. This conquered. They didn't move like us. There was a grace in their steps that made gravity look like a suggestion. Their speech had the glide of music. You didn't just hear it, you wore it, like a warm cloak thrown over your shoulders. And because truth is always braided with the counterfeit, they said things only heaven could know. Private griefs, secret hopes. They didn't need to finish a sentence. Your heart finished it for you. Women responded. How could they not? This wasn't a cheap compliment at the well. This was being seen with the kind of focus that melts defenses.
And the women began to glow with borrowed light, eyes brighter, laughter softer, patience thinner. The ordinary rhythms that hold the village together, the sunrise chores, the gossip, the Sabbath songs, went out of tune. Marriage licenses were signed in smoke. The bells rang, yes, but no priest with clean hands blessed those bonds. The watchers chose favorites. Of course they did. They chose the ones whose souls ran bright even in a dim world. They promised them safety, knowledge, a shortcut to meaning. Rebellion always promises a shortcut. And the women, starved for a love that felt monumental, said yes to men who were not men at all. Then came the children, not just tall kids who dominate JV basketball. We're talking bodies like moving architecture, shoulders as wide as city gates, hands that could uproot a tree like a carrot, voices that rolled across valleys, appetite like a furnace with the door blown off. Picture a toddler tantrum scaled to a pickup truck-sized fist, reason without restraint, power without conscience, intellect without humility. They were clever, they planned, they demanded, and when the herds and harvests couldn't keep up, they consumed what's left when food runs out.
You, the nightmares, had birth certificates. Heaven watched, not passive, not indifferent, grieved. The earth groaned like an old house in a windstorm, and the one whose patience makes galaxies feel safe decided that safety mattered more than letting rot run. Judgment didn't flare like a temper. It unfolded like surgery, precise, costly, entirely necessary. The archangels assembled, not artwork with gilded halos, but commanders who have never lost a war. Michael at the front, bearing more than a blade, bearing mandate. Gabriel, message carried like lightning. Uriel, bright with truth, hotter than noon in July. Raphael, gentleness turned steel. They did not fly down reckless. They counted costs. Rebellion had reproduced. It covered the map like kudzu. The mission had to be more than strikes. It had to be reset. And then God did what only God can do. He used the elements like instruments. Skies unzipped. Springs ruptured from below. Water became verdict. Picture Houston during a hurricane, then multiply it past math. This wasn't a storm system. This was creation obeying its maker. The flood didn't just erase, it mourned. You can hear lament in the way rain hammers when you're awake at 3 a.m., wondering if your roof will hold. Now stretch that to 40 nights. The giants learned fear. Their height couldn't buy air. Their strength couldn't out-wrestle water. They climbed peaks that went missing under waves. That's what judgment does. It ignores your resume. The fallen angels watched too, chained, conscious, unable to lift a finger to quiet the screams of the women they once wooed, or the children they'd bragged about. Hell isn't only fire. Sometimes it's awareness you can't shut off. The ark rode the swells like a stubborn candle that refuses to blow out. Inside, half the world smells. Fear, faith, waiting. Outside, the end of an era. When the water finally lowered and the door opened, the wind that met Noah smelled clean, the way air smells after a thunderstorm over the Midwest. Ozone and promise. But clean doesn't mean unscarred.
There were no giant bones bleaching on hillsides, no ruined citadels to tour. The judgment had wiped the chalkboard, not left half a diagram behind. And still, mercy didn't mean forgetfulness. The angels who stayed loyal took up a new station. Watch, guard, remember. Keep the line bold black, not pencil gray. You can almost see them posted over coastlines like lighthouses, listening to waves that carried more than foam.
Because the story of the women wasn't done. Some folded under sorrow, repentance cutting deep and real. Some couldn't find the bottom and went numb. And some, Nama, chief among them, refused to bend. The pride that drew heaven's gaze like a moth to a match still burned in her eyes. She had led others into velvet rebellion and wore it like couture. Justice answers that kind of defiance in kind, not beasts. Warnings. Voices that pull sailors toward beautiful deaths. The curse fits the crime. You turned a song into a snare, now sing forever, and watch men learn too late that beauty without truth is a rip current. You can call that myth if it makes you comfortable. I call it the mercy of memory. Not every line in history comes with a photograph. Some arrive as stories the sea keeps telling, so we don't forget how quickly lust masquerades as love, how easily more becomes a mouth that never stops eating. So where does that leave us? 21st century people who don't haul water in jars and measure giants in feet and inches, not cubits. It leaves us with mirrors. Who gets your gaze? What voice makes you ignore the weather report and sail anyway? Which boundary did God build into your life not to kill your joy, but to keep your roof from caving in? If this hits, if you felt the undertow of counterfeit charm somewhere in your own story, name it in the comments, not as gossip, but as testimony. Forward this to a friend who chases beauty like it can't possibly bite. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. We still haven't reached the moment when Michael, the sword no one wants to see up close, turns toward the women left standing on a clean earth and writes the last hard sentence of this tale. Stay. The water has stilled, but justice is still moving.
Picture the moment the water pulled back. Not just a shoreline creeping out like at low tide in Maine, but whole continents blinking back into the light. The air was heavy, not with rain anymore, but with silence. That first silence after judgment is deafening. Noah and his family stepped out, feet sinking into mud that still held the shapes of yesterday. Every breath carried the weight of survivors, people who'd seen the world erased like chalk under a wet rag. Above them, clouds scattered, revealing a sun that seemed too bright for a planet that had just wept for 40 days. But somewhere, deep, dark, and unreachable, the watchers were not stepping into sunlight. They were buried, shackled, bound in pits so far from the surface that the concept of up became a cruel joke. These were not prison cells with bars. This was the kind of confinement that feels like you've been folded into stone itself. The chains weren't iron. They were something older, forged in a place where no rebellion had yet dared to breathe. They could not move, could not touch, could not taste the air they once shaped into sweet words for mortal ears. Their thoughts were their torment, playing back the moment they leapt from the ledge of obedience over and over.
They had traded eternal light for a night that doesn't end. The women who'd been theirs were scattered now. Some wandered the ruins of what used to be home, running their fingers over stone that once made hearths, trying to remember how to live without the hum in the air those beings carried. Others stood at the edge of the sea, staring so long the waves seemed to answer them. And then there was Nama, always Nama. She didn't stare in longing, she stared in challenge, as if daring heaven to take from her the thing she'd clung to most, herself. Her pride was a fortress, her beauty a weapon she refused to lay down. And that, perhaps, is why the curse came tailored. The transformation wasn't a flare of magic or a bolt from the clouds. It was slower, crueler, like dye sinking into cloth. Her voice, once warm, became honey laced with glass. Her eyes carried a shimmer that pulled strangers toward her without knowing why. But her feet, they led only toward the water. She belonged to it now. The sea does not keep you because it loves you. It keeps you because it owns you. And so the legends were born. Fishermen swore they heard singing on fog-heavy mornings, the kind that wrap your boat in gray and steal the horizon.
Sailors spoke of a woman on the rocks, hair like midnight silk, eyes like storms. Those who rowed toward her rarely rowed back. Maybe you've heard those stories and filed them under myth. But what is a myth if not memory dressed in metaphor? These women, these sirens, were not fantasies. They were monuments to a lesson the flood carved into history. Beauty without truth will drown you. Michael knew this. The other loyal angels knew it too. That's why even after the world reset, they did not relax. They patrolled. They guarded the new boundaries like shepherds over lambs. And every time the sea sang, they remembered the chains beneath the mountain. Because those chains still hold, for now. But if there's one thing every soldier of heaven knows, it's that a prisoner with enough time will try the locks. And should they ever break, the world will see again what happens when light-bearers fall for the taste of dust. You don't have to believe it, but if you've ever been pulled toward something that looked like heaven and felt like drowning, you already know it's true.
If you strip away the giants, the chains, the flood, the curses, you're left with something painfully simple, a choice about boundaries. Not the kind you set for other people, but the kind you set for yourself. The watchers stepped over theirs and never came back. The women let theirs be erased and paid with futures they never planned for. The world paid too. That's the way sin works. It's never just your mess. It's a mess everyone has to mop up. Boundaries are God's architecture for joy. They're the walls that hold up the roof of peace. Tear one down because it feels romantic or exciting, and the collapse isn't slow, it's sudden, crushing, merciless. The lesson here? Guard your gaze. Guard your yes. Guard the moments when your heart wants to sprint past the warning signs because the road ahead looks golden. Sometimes that gold is just sunlight on a floodplain. And if you've crossed that line already, hear this. The same God who opened the ark door still opens doors for you. You don't have to stay chained to a choice. You don't have to sing songs that lead others to wreckage.
Turn. Step back behind the line. Build the wall again. Judgment is real, yes, but so is mercy. And both are sharper than they look from a distance. This story isn't a bedtime fable. It's a flare, a signal that the same currents still run under the calm surface of our modern lives. You might not meet a giant in the supermarket or hear a siren in the harbor, but the principle is everywhere. Every harmless DM from someone who's not yours, every job offer that smells like compromise, every voice that tells you you'll miss out if you don't take the shortcut. These are the modern watchers, the modern glances, the modern more. And I'm telling you now, don't trade your light for dust. Don't step over a boundary God built to keep you alive. If you felt that pull, this is your wake-up. So, here's what I want you to do. Drop a comment and tell me the boundary you're most grateful for. Share this video with the one friend you know is flirting with a choice that will cost them more than they can imagine. Hit that subscribe button because the story isn't over. Next, we're going to step into the moment the Archangel Michael himself moves across the earth, not with the flood at his back, but with the sword in his hand. And trust me, you want to see what happens when heaven's general stops watching and starts acting. Stay close. The tide's not done rising.
The air was sharp that morning, thin, cold, carrying the scent of a world scrubbed clean. The flood had done its work, but heaven's war wasn't over. Somewhere far above the peaks, still drying under the sun, Michael moved. He didn't fall the way the watchers had. He descended, and there's a difference. Falling is uncontrolled, a surrender to gravity. Descending is deliberate, a king stepping down from his throne with purpose. Every beat of his wings shifted the air, not violently, but with the weight of authority that makes your knees want to buckle without knowing why. From the ground, he might have looked like a shaft of sunlight piercing through the leftover mist. But when he landed, the ground didn't shake, it yielded. Nature recognizes the servants of its maker. Michael's eyes scanned the land like a ledger. He wasn't here for the animals or the fields or even the ruins. He was here for what the flood didn't wash away, hearts still beating with the rebellion that started this whole unraveling. Naama stood among them. Her hair clung to her shoulders, damp from the salt wind. She smiled, the kind of smile that says, "I know why you're here, and I'm not impressed." Around her, a few other women lingered, those who had once been wives of the Watchers. Some carried shame like a shroud. Others, like Naama, wore defiance like perfume. Michael didn't speak right away. He let the silence press in, heavy, until every ear strained for his voice. When it came, it wasn't thunder. It was the kind of calm that makes you realize thunder would have been kinder. The line was drawn, and you crossed it. Mercy opened its hand, and you turned your face. Now, justice stands where mercy stood. One of the women dropped to her knees, sobbing, begging for another chance. Michael's gaze softened, just for her, but his attention slid back to Naama. You were warned. You were given the sight to know who they were, and still you chose them. You carried their seed into the world, and even now
With the waters gone, you sing the same song. Naama's chin tilted upward, defiance glinting in her eyes. "Would you have me crawl?" she asked, her voice like velvet over steel. Michael's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with resolve. He said, "No, you will swim." And the sentence was sealed. Her legs buckled, not from fear, but as if the very earth beneath her had turned liquid. The sea answered its cue, sending a curl of foam up the shore like an eager accomplice.
Water wrapped around her ankles, climbing higher, until the waves swallowed her whole. The others gasped, some in horror, some in recognition. When the surface broke again, she was not the same. Her beauty remained, but it was sharpened into something dangerous. Her voice carried over the waves, rich and aching, but with a pull that promised shipwreck. She turned once, meeting Michael's gaze, and then slid back into the depths. And so the first siren was born, not by accident, not by nature, but by judgment. Michael turned to the others. "Repentance is your ark," he said. "Step into it while the door is open." Some did, some didn't, and heaven's ledger adjusted accordingly. Michael didn't return to the high courts immediately. He stayed. Not in a throne room or a camp, but on the edges, coasts, riverbanks, high cliffs where the wind tastes of salt and old stories. His mission wasn't just punishment, it was prevention. The sirens sang. They had no choice now. Their voices wove through fog, threading themselves into the ears of sailors who thought themselves immune to superstition. But Michael was the counterweight, the light on the horizon that warned before the rocks did, the watchman who didn't sleep. And yet he didn't silence them entirely. That wasn't the point. Judgment wasn't about erasing the memory. It was about preserving it, a living cautionary tale. Every shipwreck told the same truth. Beauty without obedience will kill you. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Languages shifted. The names of the watchers faded into myths. But the line Michael guarded never blurred. He had seen what happened when heaven's own crossed it, and he had no intention of letting history repeat unchecked. He became the uncredited savior in countless tales, ships steering away from sudden storms, sailors turning back at the last moment, entire fleets rerouting because of a gut feeling that wasn't theirs at all. The women who repented lived out quiet lives. Their children, fully human now, blended into the villages, carrying only whispers of their mother's strange beauty. But they carried something else, too, a wariness of the sea, and an instinctive respect for the boundaries their mothers had learned the hard way. Still, the song remained, and Michael remained with it. Here's the haunting truth. The chains beneath the mountain are not permanent. The watchers, those original rebels, are held until the great day, Scripture says, which means there's a date on heaven's calendar when the locks will open, not to set them free, but to finish what began when they first leapt from their posts. When that day comes, the flood will look like a warm-up. It won't be water this time.
And here's where it gets uncomfortably close to home. The spirit that made them fall is alive and well. It's the same whisper that tells you God's boundaries are holding you back, not holding you together. The same pull that makes you stare too long at what you've been told is off limits. Michael knows this. That's why he's still here, not standing in the clouds, but at the edges of our choices. You might not see him, but you'll feel him when you're about to step over a line you can't uncross. That pause, that moment of maybe I shouldn't, that's not your conscience alone. That's the general standing between you and a cliff you don't even know is there. The reckoning will come. The sea will give up its dead. The sirens will fall silent, and every choice will stand in the light without a shadow to hide in. The question is, where will you be standing when it happens?
The story of the Watchers and the women they chose feels ancient, too far away to touch. But the pattern, that's right here, right now, walking around in sneakers and business suits. You've seen it. We all have. It starts with a look, just like it did before the flood. Not always in a marketplace, sometimes across a bar, across a conference table, across a social media feed at 2 in the morning. The Watchers were heavenly beings who decided that God's don't was an obstacle, not a safeguard. Today's Watchers wear human skin, but the spirit is the same. That pull, that sense of, I know this is dangerous, but it feels like it's for me. And here's the part we don't like to admit. Danger can feel delicious. Boundaries start to soften. Conversations slip into places they shouldn't. You hear yourself telling stories you've never shared with the person you promised forever to. Or maybe it's not romantic, it's a business deal. An opportunity that would mean trimming the truth, massaging the numbers. And all along, something inside whispers, this is your shortcut to more. That was the hook in the days of Noah, and it's still the hook now. Shortcuts that skip obedience in the name of experience. The women of Genesis didn't wake up planning to birth giants. They said yes to charm, to mystery, to the thrill of being seen in a way they'd never been seen before. And in that yes, they opened a door they couldn't close. We do the same. Every affair starts with a glance. Every scandal starts with a choice to step 1 inch past the line just this once. The rest unfolds faster than you think. And maybe you're thinking, but there's no Nephilim now, no supernatural hybrid children stomping through the streets. True, but there are consequences just as towering. Families fractured, trust shattered, reputations sinking faster than stone in water. The giants today walk in courtrooms, in custody battles, in bank accounts drained dry. They live in sleepless nights, in the hollow look of someone who realized too late that the more they chased left them with less than nothing. The spirit of the Watchers still hunts, and the sea still sings. The song just comes through new speakers, TikTok videos, dating apps, the subtle flattery from someone who knows exactly how to thread themselves into your loneliness. And just like before, Michael still stands watch. You may never see him, but you will feel him in the hesitation, that pause before you send the message. That strange heaviness before you sign your name. That moment when you know, without knowing why, that this will cost you more than it will give you. The line is still there. The only question is whether you'll stay on the right side of it. Michael's patrol hasn't ended.
It's just shifted forms. In the ancient world, he guarded coastlines from the siren's song. In our world, he guards the shores of our decisions. Sometimes he shouts. Most times he whispers. It's that sinking feeling when you're about to commit to something you really want, but really shouldn't. It's the friend who calls you out of nowhere right before you take the step you've been justifying in your head all week. It's the Bible verse that pops into your mind in the middle of a conversation that's drifting somewhere it shouldn't. These aren't coincidences. They're interventions. The problem is we mistake interventions for inconveniences. We call them bad timing or cold feet. But that cold feet might just be a heavenly general planting himself in your path, saying, "Not this way." In the days after the flood, there were women who listened, who turned, who rebuilt their lives inside the boundaries they had once despised. They never made headlines. They weren't sung about in poems, but they lived, and their children lived, and their names were carried forward in the quiet faithfulness that never needs a stage. We have the same choice now. Ignore the whisper and chase the thrill, or take the long road that feels harder but keeps your soul intact. Michael isn't here to make you paranoid. He's here to make you aware. The watchers aren't gone. The sea hasn't fallen silent, but neither has heaven. And maybe, just maybe, you're being guarded right now without even knowing it. Scripture calls it the great day, not a holiday, not a festival. The day when the chains beneath the mountain are unlocked, not for release, but for final reckoning. On that day, the watchers will stand in the light they abandoned, stripped of the disguises they once wore. The sirens will fall silent as the sea itself bends to the judgment it once carried. And Michael, this time, will not come to warn. He will come to finish. It won't be water this time. The promise in Genesis was clear. But fire. Fire has always been waiting, and it will cleanse in a way even the flood could not. And every choice, yours, mine, theirs, will be weighed, not compared to each other, but against the truth.
Against the line we knew was there, even when we pretended we didn't see it. Here's the sobering part. The spirit that made them fall will be judged, but until that day, it's still free to whisper. That's why the stakes are just as high now as they were then, maybe higher, because now we know how the story ends, and we still get to choose our part in it. This isn't just their story, it's yours. Every day you stand at the edge of a line. Sometimes it's bright and bold. Sometimes it's faint, almost invisible. But it's there, and the way you choose will write the ending to your chapter. The women in Genesis weren't evil caricatures. They were human, lonely, flattered, hopeful, tempted, just like us. The watchers weren't mindless monsters. They were majestic, intelligent, persuasive. That's why the story stings. It's not black and white. It's 1,000 shades of almost right. The question is, will you step over, or will you guard the line, even when it feels like it's costing you something precious? Because here's the truth. What you think you're losing now might just be the very thing that saves you later. And the more that calls your name might be the beginning of a flood you can't survive. So guard your gaze, guard your yes, and when the whisper comes, when the modern watchers try to weave themselves into your story, Remember the seed. Remember the chains. Remember the line. The flood was the first warning. The fire will be the last.
Let me tell you a story that isn't in Genesis, but it might as well be. It starts on the Gulf Coast. Small town, docks that smell like diesel and salt, shrimp boats lined up like rusting teeth. A man named Caleb works the water. He's steady, quiet, the kind of man who counts the tide as faithfully as the calendar. Married 15 years, 2 kids, a mortgage, and a faith that's weathered both hurricanes and layoffs. One morning, fog rolls in thick and heavy, white as milk, sound muffled like the whole world's wrapped in cotton. Caleb's pulling in nets when he hears it. A song. Not the radio, not gulls. A voice, soft, winding through the air like steam from a cup of coffee on a cold morning. He tells himself it's nothing, keeps working. But the next day it's there again, closer, and the next. By week's end, he can make out words. They're not in English, but somehow he understands them. Promises, longing, a sense that whoever's singing knows him better than anyone on shore ever could. And then he sees her. She's sitting on the rocks past the jetty, hair black and dripping, skin pale like moonlight. Her eyes catch his, and it's like the air between them collapses. Every ache he's never voiced, every what-if rushes forward. She doesn't beckon. She doesn't need to. The tide's already pulling him. Now, pause. This isn't a fairy tale. This is every temptation you've ever met in the fog. The co-worker who understands you better than your spouse. The old flame who slides into your DMs with "Remember when?" The investment that promises to double your money if you just look the other way on how it's made. Caleb's story is your shoreline. The siren is whatever is singing to you right now. The fog makes it harder to see the rocks, but they're still there, always there. Here's the part Caleb doesn't know. Up on the cliffs, almost invisible in the fog, Michael stands. Not in armor this time, not with a flaming sword, just a man-shaped shadow with eyes that see straight through the mist. He doesn't shout Caleb's name. He doesn't yank the wheel. He plants one thought in the fisherman's mind. What will this cost? It's not fear. It's clarity. Caleb blinks. The song wavers. For the first time, he notices the black shapes under the water, around the rocks. Splintered wood, frayed nets, things that looked like they used to be boats. He tastes salt, sharper than the sea. And he turns the tiller toward shore. When he steps off the dock, the fog begins to lift. The song fades. And somewhere out past the jetty, the siren slips back into the deep, her melody unfinished. Caleb won't tell anyone about what he saw, but that night he holds his wife longer. He eats dinner with his kids without glancing at his phone, and he sleeps without dreams. That's the thing about Michael. Half the time you'll never know he was there, but you'll know you avoided something you can't quite name. Your siren probably isn't sitting on a rock. She's in your feed, on your calendar, in your inbox. She's a deal, a fling, a habit. She's whatever makes you look twice and think, no one would have to know. The Watcher's story isn't history, it's a blueprint. And the enemy runs the same plays because they still work. But so does heaven. The line God drew for you is personal. It's placed exactly where your soul needs it. It's not random. It's not overprotective. It's the difference between sailing home or sinking in the fog. And the watchman? He's still on the cliffs, still seeing what you can't, still willing to stand in the mist and whisper the one thought that can save you. What will this cost? You can step over, you can chase the song, you can call it freedom, or you can turn the tiller. One choice will give you a story you can tell without shame. The other will give you a story you'll never stop regretting. The line is still there. The fog will lift, and the tide, just like the tide in Noah's day, waits for no one.
It won't start with a whisper. On that day, the great day, the sky itself will tear, not like a sunset or a storm, but like fabric pulled by invisible hands. Light will pour through, not gentle or golden, but alive, fierce, and impossibly pure. The sea will answer first. You'll hear it before you see it. Waves groaning, churning, coughing up what they've hidden for ages. Sirens dragged from the depths, their beauty unmasked, their songs twisted into screams. The chains beneath the mountain will rattle, then snap, not to set the watchers free, but to drag them into the court they've been avoiding since the flood. Michael will step forward. This time there will be no mist, no hesitation. The ground will bow under his feet. The sword in his hand will blaze, not like fire, but like the first light ever spoken into existence. The watchers will stand, stripped of glory, their rebellion naked before the throne. The sirens will thrash, but the sea will not let them go. And Michael will move, not with fury, but with the calm precision of a soldier carrying out the final line of a long-standing order. The verdict will not be shouted. It will be spoken so clearly the whole world will feel the weight of it in their bones. The line you crossed will never be crossed again. And then the unmaking. The watchers swallowed in the lake that burns without end. The sirens silenced forever, their last notes swallowed by a roar that shakes creation. The sea will still, its surface as smooth as glass, and Michael will turn, not to heaven yet, but to the remnant, to the ones who guarded the line, even in the fog. His gaze will rest on them, not with pride, but with something deeper, acknowledgement. When the dust settles and the sea lies quiet, there will be a song. Not from the sirens, they will be gone, but from the remnant, a song of those who held the line, who turned the tiller when the fog was thick, who refused the shortcut for the sake of the long road. It won't be polished or rehearsed. It will rise raw, like breath after running, gratitude laced with relief, worship that isn't polite. It's desperate, unfiltered, full-bodied. And Michael will watch, sword at his side, the glow of battle still on him, not as a hero to be worshipped, because he serves the same king you do, but as a brother who fought beside you. For all eternity, that day will stand as proof. The line held, the watchers failed, the sea gave up its song, and the God who drew the first boundary drew it well.
That day isn't here yet, which means the song still plays in the fog. The whispers still slide in through the cracks, and the line is still yours to guard. If you've been flirting with the edge, if you've been leaning toward the rocks because the voice there sounds sweeter than the shore, turn now. The fog isn't your friend, the song isn't for your good, and the watcher's charm always comes with chains. The flood was the first warning. The fire will be the last. You don't have to be on the wrong side of it. This is the moment you decide which side of the line you'll stand on when the sky splits. I'm not here to scare you into obedience. I'm here to tell you the truth in full color. There is no neutral in this story. There are only those who guard the line and those who cross it. If this has stirred something in you, share it. Not because it's my voice, but because the voice in it might be the whisper someone else needs before they take the wrong step. Drop a comment. Tell me the boundary that saved you before, or the one you're rebuilding now. Let's make the comments section a shoreline full of watchmen. Hit like so the algorithm pushes this to someone else in the fog. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, because next time we're going deeper into the very first time a boundary was crossed in human history, in a garden where everything was good until it wasn't. Stay close. The tide is still moving, and the line is still here.